Today we answer one of the questions for the ages, digital versus traditional. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe not one of the questions for the ages because in comparison, digital hasn't been around quite as long. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where we create robots, aliens, zombies, and other imminent threats to humanity. And we can do that one of two ways, either digital or traditional. At least I do. I kind of switch back and forth. I've been doing a lot of digital stuff lately on the channel, but I thought it might be a nice change of pace to do traditional. I've actually got this sketch cover. So sketch cover, a little hard to do digital because it's a physical medium that you have to draw on. So I've got this Ultraman sketch cover. I am a big fan of like giant kaijus and things like that. I love drawing giant monsters and all that stuff, and Ultraman is one of those characters that is just right for that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. But you know, because I'm doing something traditional, and like I said, I do a lot of digital stuff too, I get the question all the time, which is better, digital or traditional? So you probably know where I'm going to go with this, being someone that does both and switches back and forth, that there are probably some pros and cons to each, and I enjoy doing each. But for some reason, people want to pick and choose. They want to know definitely which is better. And I don't know if you're going to get a definite answer from me, but you are definitely going to get some of my thoughts on that while I illustrate this cover. Should be fun, so let's get into it. All right, flipping through this book. This is a sketch cover that I'm going to do for an Ultraman comic, surprisingly put out by Marvel. I didn't know that Marvel had the rights to do Ultraman, but that's pretty cool. Maybe we'll see him in the Marvel universe. I don't know how that works, but always kind of a cool character. I remember watching this character when I was growing up in California. I lived in California for a little bit, and there was this show where there was kind of this host. You know, he's kind of a crazy host, and they would show these stuff that they would import from Japan way back in the day. So I've been familiar with Ultraman for a while, and when I was a kid, I was into some of that stuff because I collected like the Shogun Warriors and all that stuff. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about digital versus traditional. And even though I'm doing a traditional piece right now, I don't want you to get it twisted and think that, oh no, he's gonna be all pro or traditional and not so much digital. And with me, honestly, I go back and forth. I do both in tandem sometimes. I use a little bit of both techniques sometimes on the same project. It really doesn't matter. These are just tools, and whatever tool you use is what's right for you. All right? Show over, I guess. No, I'm actually going to go in and talk about some of the differences and some of the pros and cons, and hopefully let you make an informed decision if you are up in the air about which path you want to take. So first off, I want to talk about the cost. Now, with digital, there's usually a larger upfront cost. I mean, if your computer set up, software, something, and some of this stuff is going down a little bit. I mean, you can get some software that's either free or less expensive rather than more expensive software like a Photoshop or something. And maybe you already have all the computer equipment and everything, so that might not be as big of a barrier of entry. But say if you don't have like an iPad, you want to go out and get an iPad or whatever, those can cost quite a bit of money. So there can be this large expense going into it. Now, that being said, over time, I think traditional may cost a little more because you have to constantly replenish things. And of course, there's upgrades and things. You got to upgrade your computer equipment and all that stuff too. But usually with digital, there's a big upfront cost. Traditional, I mean, all you really need is a pencil and a sketchbook or even loose sheets of paper or whatever, and you can pretty much, you're good to go on the traditional end of it. Of course, there are expensive, Copic markers in general. I mean, you could spend a small fortune on that stuff, almost as much as you would for an iPad. So some of the stuff can get expensive, but just the basics, just to draw, it's going to be cheaper just to start traditional, but over time it may cost a little more. And as far as price goes, just because you've purchased you know, you put down that upfront cost, like say for like a Wacom tablet or an iPad, it doesn't mean that you aren't going to have to replace that. Now, Wacoms are really good about holding their value, and I've had one that has lasted forever and it continues to go, and it's just a really good investment. They're a little more expensive compared to like an iPad where, you know, Apple designs their products purposefully to be out of date after a while, so you have to buy a new one. A lot of their business model revolves around planned obsolescence, where, you know, you've got to get the next best thing and constantly upgrade, and that can get expensive. So it depends what device you're using. So it's, you know, in some ways, I mean, they'll probably last a lot longer than maybe a pencil or a tube of paint, but you will have to continue to invest in that equipment if you want to keep it up to date. The other thing, and this isn't so much the case anymore, but it used to be mobility, whereas previous to now that we've got these tablets that we can take around and everything, and there are, I mean, you don't have to get an iPad. There are cheaper versions of portable tablets and things like that that you can use. But the whole idea, I mean, previous to tablets, is that you can take a sketchbook wherever you go, and you still can. You don't have to worry about, you know, bringing along all the chargers and all that kind of stuff and making sure your battery's charged and everything. So in some ways, traditional is a little more portable still, but the gap on that is kind of closing. So, and like I said, technology is the case. So one of the pros to traditional is you're not kind of bound or hindered by that technology. For instance, your battery dies, or having to worry about keeping something charged up, or if you lose power or something like that. If you're in the house and you lose power, you know, you're kind of out of luck unless your battery's charged and everything. But so with traditional, you got your sketchbook, as long as you got a candle or something, the power goes off, you can still continue working. And that's why I think always, not if you're just totally digital and you've never even, you know, really, I don't know if too many people have done this, but never really broke out a pencil and sketched. If you come to a situation where, you know, that technology fails you, and you're like, oh, I don't really have a backup, that's the only way I know how to work. So it's good, definitely good, at least as a fallback to have that sketchbook and stuff like that, because you never know what technology is going to do. And that also has to go with like saving, and with digital, you can lose your work or have a corrupt file or whatever. You can lose all the stuff you're doing, or your computer can crash on you and stuff. That usually doesn't happen. Although even with traditional, sometimes there are issues like that, because you could lose a sketchbook or whatever. And I've had, if you watched my previous Halloween video, you saw where my dog ate one of my sketchbooks, so that can happen. I mean, that's not just an excuse for you're not turning in your homework. Dogs can actually do that. So so those are some of the things you have to worry about. But I think more with computers, you run into that problem of, you know, losing files or having something corrupt or something like that. So technology can tend to fail you if you're you know, well, even if you're careful. I mean, you can back stuff up and put things to the cloud, and that stuff helps. But so other things I wanted to talk about is just the learning process. Is it better to learn traditionally or digitally? Now, when you're learning digitally, I mean, digital is great as far as kind of speeding up that process, and, you know, if you make a mistake, if you draw something wrong, you can quickly undo it and everything. Now you can erase with traditional media, but it's not as quick of a process as just going back. You can create on layers, you can move things around, you can cut things, you can paste things, you can enlarge, you can rotate, and that really speeds up the process, I think, when you're sketching, or when you're even with your learning to create digitally. But the other thing is the limitations you have with traditional media. Sometimes that's advantageous. When you have these limitations, it kind of trains you not to make as many mistakes, because if you make those mistakes, they're not as easy to undo. And you can, you know, go over it with correction, like paint or whatever. So it's not like you're doomed if you mess up with traditional media. People have been working in traditional media for a long time and have found ways to fix problems and things like that. So, but definitely I find, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing more digital work now, is the speed of that process. Being able to you know, like all the things I said, cut and move things around, and if things don't look exactly the way you want, you don't have to redraw something so much as you can you know, flip something or do whatever. So, and like I said, working with layers, that is you know, there's a big plus to that. Now when you're learning, I think it's easier, in some ways it's easier to learn traditionally, because you know, it is what it is. It's a piece of paper and a pencil, and you know, the drawing may be difficult. Learning how to draw may be difficult, but the process itself isn't as difficult. Whereas when you're learning software, it can be a lot harder, because it's like, oh, where are all these? If you work in digital, it's like, oh, I got to learn where all these tools are. What do they do? What do the different icons mean? How do you do this specific task? All those different things. Where I think with traditional, it's just more intuitive. You know, I'm holding the pencil, I put the pencil down, I draw. If I want to make a sort of effect with ink or with whatever, it's more intuitive. Where if you want to replicate that digitally, sometimes it's hard to figure that out. But once you do, I definitely think there's some pluses to you know, working digital because of all that. But just learning new softwares, and softwares come and go and everything. And I've been using Photoshop and Illustrator, and even though there's other softwares, and now I'm using Clip Studio Paint, but I still haven't even scratched the surface of what I can do in Clip Studio Paint. I know kind of how to do what I want to do, but it's always like, oh, I got to do this. How do I do that? Maybe I'll just go back into take this into Photoshop, because I know how to do it in there, rather than trying to figure out how to do that specific task that I already know how to do in Photoshop and Clip Studio. So just learning where everything is and all that stuff, that can be, you know, there could be some issues to that. All right, so yeah, and I like I said, I just think it may be a little easier to learn doing things traditionally. Now with digital, with all the pluses and things that digital have, I think there's still, as people, especially like non-artists, I think that when they look at digital, there's a stigma that goes along with digital, and I don't think they look at it as another tool. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that still, when hear people say, you know, there's that phrase out there that, oh, I photoshopped that, or that's been photoshopped, and I think because that phrase and the masses have heard that, people who aren't necessarily artists, they've got this notion that I think a lot of them just think that there's like a button in Photoshop that you just push and it says draw, and you push that button and it just draws stuff for you, or paint, and that's not the case, but a lot of people think that. So there is sort of this negative reaction if you say you work digital. There's a lot of people that still don't think it's art, or they think that that program is creating the artwork for you. And although it can help, it's like any other tool. I mean, it's easier to hammer in a nail with a hammer than a rock, but it's still just a tool. It's still something that's you still have to put the effort into it. You still have to know what you're doing, and you still have to learn how to draw. It's not going to do it for you. So that is sort of it's sort of a negative as far as other people, what they think about, you know, digital. And with any tool, I just want to remind people that these are tools, but not to use them as a crutch. I mean, you've got to learn how to draw, and sometimes I think maybe learning traditionally may help you, and then translating that to traditional, or digital rather, just because of some of the things I talked about, as far as it's a little easier to get your head around. Not, you're a little more, you know, try to be more precise, because you're not worried about, or you are worried about making the mistakes. Where, you know, I think it's going to train you to be a little better of an artist. But but the flip side is there's just so many, you know, so many pluses as far as the expediency of working digital and everything. Some of the other things that some pluses with digital is that once you create it, it's basically ready for print. If you're going to print something, you can send that out to the printer directly from the file you already have. Whereas with traditional work, you have to either scan that or photograph it, and you know, that can take some time to do. And that's one thing I definitely don't miss. I don't miss scanning things in. I haven't really scanned anything in a while. Lately, you know, if I do a sketch, and I've been doing a lot more digital sketches, but if I do a traditional sketch, sometimes I'll try to photograph it just so I don't have to, you know, break out the scanner, and it takes time to scan it, all that stuff. But even that takes long, and you know, a long time, and to get that picture right and everything. But if you're just sharing it on social media, I don't know. I think digital is definitely better in that department. So just the fact that it's kind of ready to print and get out there once, if you're working digital, you don't have to worry about those other steps. However, one of the pluses, one of the big pluses to working traditional is just the feel, that texture of the paper, and there's really nothing else like it. And that's why I like working like what I'm doing now with this sketchbook, doing this every once in a while, just to remind me what that feels like, because you lose some of that when you're working digital. It's just not the same feeling that, it's just that physicality and everything you just lose when you're working digitally. But and there are ways, and texture is a big part of it. When you're working on textured paper, the texture's there. When you're working with analog tools, there's little inconsistencies and things like that that really it adds to the artwork, I think. Whereas you can try to replicate that stuff with digital, and I make digital tools and brushes and all that kind of stuff, and I try my best to replicate what actual brushes do, but it's difficult. And just to learn how to do, you're basically trying to take something that's digital and make it and sort of mimic what you're trying to do traditionally. And sometimes that can be difficult because but it can be done, and things are getting better all the time. And even now, I think Photoshop and some other programs have things that when you're like putting down watercolor, there's like almost like a little animation where it looks like the watercolor is still drawing, or it's not just like instantaneous. So they're doing things to try to make it feel more like traditional drawing, which is kind of cool. The other thing, one of the pros to digital is the setup. When you're working traditional, you have to set your stuff up, you have to break it down, you've got to clean up, depending on what kind of media you're doing, and sometimes that can take up a lot of time to do all that, to get in the mode and everything of, I got my stuff set up and now I can start to work. Whereas with digital, you just open the file and you're ready to go, and you can stop pretty much at any point. You don't have to worry about going to wash out your brushes or whatever. So that is definitely a plus when it comes to digital. Now, one of the big things that I want to talk about, and one of the big pluses to this, is probably one of the, if there's any like one thing that outweighs that would make I think traditional better than digital, is the fact that you have this physical piece of artwork. This sketch cover, I couldn't do this digital because it wouldn't be on a sketch cover. Sure, I could probably maybe design it digitally and print it, run this thing through my printer if it would fit, and maybe have a product, but people don't want that. People want original artwork. So, and original artwork you can sell for a lot more. Sure, you can sell digital stuff, you can sell prints and things like that, or a lot of people that do Patreons and stuff, sometimes they'll break things down and they will offer their layered files, which has some value to it, but it's not the same as like an actual piece of artwork, and that's really cool. Things people want to own. People want to own original artwork. So financially, as far as something you could turn around and sell, I think traditional has digital beat. But like I said, there's still some things that you can do to make money off of your digital artwork by selling prints and things like that. The other thing is just like people want, when you're showing things off, like for the consumer or just people in general, I mean, it's just not as cool to do like a slideshow flip through on your iPad as it is like somebody actually flipping through your sketchbook. So that's a really, that's sort of a cool feeling. Yeah, there's just a bunch of other things, that could be pros or cons, like the zooming in with digital. Always, zoom, you can zoom in, you can look at all that. That can be a problem because you're concentrating on details that maybe you don't want to. But the plus with working traditionally is that you are seeing your piece in full the whole time. You can see what they call the gestalt, the whole, where you can always see the entirety of your artwork. But with digital, it's a little different because when you're zoomed in, you don't get to see that. Now, there are things you can do. You can create little extra other windows that show where you're zoomed out, and there are tricks like that. But I don't know, I just think when you're working traditional, you're always seeing your full artwork. And then, if you need to, I mean, you can get a little closer with your eyes, but it's not much. So we're getting close to wrapping this thing up, and I think you can see where I'm going with this, where there's really not a right or wrong way. It's just your own personal preference, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can draw traditionally, scan it in, and I know people that do these paintings, but then they go in and they edit it on the computer, or they do all their sketching digitally, so you can do all that tweaking and reversing and expanding and all that kind of stuff, and then print it out and ink traditionally to get that feel, and then you have something to sell. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. But you know, play around, do what works best for you. And yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. Okay, there you go. This is my finished sketch cover, front and back, kind of a nice little spread. I like doing these. I like working traditional. I also like working digital. And like I mentioned, there are pros and cons to both. I think, you know, lately I've been doing a lot of digital stuff. I think my process is getting a little faster doing that kind of stuff, but I can't stay away from this kind of stuff, doing traditional work for so long, just because that texture, that feel, and having something physical that I can hold in my hand. There's nothing really else like that. So whatever route you decide to take, it's okay. It doesn't have to be a big battle. You can do both. You can do a hybrid. You can do either or. There's no wrong or right way to do it. There's only your way, and you have to choose which way to do that. So the most important thing is this: you're just drawing. No matter how you do it, whatever tools you use, it doesn't matter. Just get drawing. Don't let this kind of stuff, these kind of questions, hold you back. Get out there, start drawing using whatever methods you want, and I will see you guys later. That is all.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. If you like making comics, then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more, and best of all, it's totally free.